Hello, everyone, and we are back with episode 114 of the Vacation Rental Blueprint. Joining me, as always, TC. TC, how are you?
Doing great. Good to be back. Looking forward to another wonderful conversation with Miss Snazzy.
Yes, it's another great episode in our partner profile series. As we kind of dig into, as we mentioned in one of our earlier episodes, aligning and working with partners and experts across all industries and supporting your business. And the legal side of it was definitely a main takeaway from that episode. And we've devoted, I think we'll devote about 4 episodes in this series. And then hopefully we don't scare Cassandra away and she'll do some more episodes, because in our pre-talk, I think we may have talked ourselves into 3 or 4 more episodes that we need to review. So we've got a lot, and rightfully so on the legal side of things. Running a business is a major responsibility. You want to make sure you are covered. And TC, as we get started on this episode, I just want you to know I was at one of our properties. They were doing some refreshed photos. I think the photos we had at this property were about 3 years old, I think. And to your credit, you've built a plan that continuously improves the space over time. So when you have that model in place, you got to redo those photos. I think you had some drone footage going on. You had video going on. House looked great. And when I look at the original photos compared to this round of photos, very excited to see what our photography team puts together for us for the revamp on the photos. So looking good. Just wanted to keep you updated there, because I know you've put a lot of time and money and planning into just providing a continuously improved space for your guests.
Yeah, we really do try to keep things kind of moving forward on the properties, and making sure that when the guest comes back for a second or a third visit, they continue to see some improvements, and I think they really enjoy that. Also, just feedback we get from guests during the rental process. A lot of questions they have that, man, I guess we just didn't cover it well enough in the photograph. So this time we're going to do a video walkthrough. We're going to do a 3-dimensional layout of the home so that people can get an idea of how they'll use the space, and just trying to be really responsive to what the guests are looking for when planning the visit. We talked about this at the very beginning of our podcast, is we're in the hospitality business, and people have, in many cases, saved for years to make this trip into Orlando, and we want to make sure that the space they're staying in and the family gathering they're creating is special as well.
Well, we've seen so many times where guests have said about other properties, the photos did not match the space. Those photos, perfect lighting, the house doesn't look like that, and I think that's been systemic, with Airbnb and real estate in general for a while now. And one of the things that I know we're both very proud of is our photos really don't do the property justice. I think, and that's our goal. Our driving goal is to over deliver on what you see. So if you're, seeing this custom built Toy Story room or one of these great themed rooms by our designer that we had on a previous episode, Tammy Lavaro, you're seeing this in the photos, and then you're walking in and you're just seeing layers that have been added on top of it. Not to spoil the room, because we'll share it here on one of these episodes, but that Toy Story room, which is these bunk beds that are custom built, it looks like blocks. Blocks and toys have been put together to build this essentially Toy Story bunk or 4-bed bunk system. And you walk in and you're like, oh wow, that's great. And now in the photos, it didn't even show the custom Tinker Toy lighting system hanging from the ceiling, right? And so, that's just another touch. And what the life-size Woody that is, it makes you feel like you're a toy walking into a room. Those little touches weren't there in the photos. So now you're walking in, we've over-delivered on that expectation for the guest, which is really what all of the owners listening here today, hopefully they're taking away from all of our episodes, is there is a business model, and there's money to be made in a business model that talks about over-promising and then over-delivering. And I think that's a good spot to differentiate your business in, and it's a good way to build this type of business that's dealing with hospitality and service to your guests.
And, even as we were doing this most recent round of photographs, we realized we're going to probably have to bring the photographer back out because we're going to make yet another improvement in the next week or so. And this was all the reality of, our house that we're talking about today was right next to the model home. And for years, it just hasn't been rented. Well, now that model home has been sold, it's being rented. So we realized, gosh, when our guests are enjoying the pool, we want to give our guests some privacy. So now we're replacing the screen enclosure with privacy screen enclosure so that they can feel more like they're enjoying family time without sharing it with 1,000 of their closest friends. So yet another improvement, and more photographs probably required. I know if I was in the pool with my kids and I looked over and I saw 25 other people looking at me from their pool, I'm not going to be so crazy about that. So privacy fence coming later on this week.
Well, and I definitely, the irony, and I take full responsibility for, while I met the photographer there and we're walking around the house, and while he's doing video upstairs, I'm just sitting out on the pool, in the pool area, so to give him space. And I jump on the phone with you and we start talking, and it's like, before you know it, these the pictures that aren't even done printing yet are now outdated. So I do think that was pretty hilarious. But it's also, we're in our space, we're in our investment properties for this very reason. We want to always look at these spaces with fresh perspectives and walk through it with an eye of how can we improve upon the space. And I don't think we ever get to a point where we say, I think we've done everything we can, because eventually it's cyclical and you need to start, maybe replacing some things and upgrading some things just because of general wear and tear. But it's always with that eye. We are self-managing this property. That doesn't mean you need to be on site every day. It means that when you are on site, you're maximizing your efficacy. You're walking around with fresh eyes and looking for ways to improve the space.
Yep. So eager to see the photos, eager to see the video walkthrough. We'll update the website. So, this property has its own website. So we'll update that once these are done. And we'll probably talk in the future podcasts just about dedicated websites, because that's pretty interesting as well.
We've learned a lot on the website front. I'll just say that was not my wheelhouse going into this. I've always just had a team that was like, hey, work your magic. I know it's hard. I know I'm not good at it. So here you go. And now you and I are like, all right, well, let's build a website. Let's figure this out.
Yeah. And then you build a website and you realize you have no idea how to get people to go to the website. We suck at this.
It's live. What do you mean? Google just doesn't pick it up and put it at the top of the first page, right?
That's what I thought, and I'm kind of pissed off that it doesn't work this way.
Well, with that, I think today's episode, we're going to dig into rental agreements. And joining us today for another round, hopefully being able to tolerate us on this episode, we have Cassandra Jude of the Jude Law Firm. Now, when I say the Jude Law Firm, is it the Jude Law Firm or is it the Jude Law Firm? Cassandra, weigh in here. How do we emphasize Jude Law or do we emphasize Jude?
I think it depends on your audience, Tim. Now, if they're a Jude Law fan, then it will for sure be the Jude Law Firm.
I have a new nickname for Cassandra. And for the listeners, you have to go back and listen to prior podcasts for this to make sense. It's going to be CJ Snazzy Law.
I like that.
CJ Snazzy Law.
CJ Snazzy Law dropping the law knowledge today.
Just don't remember it enough that that's what you're searching for on Google, because they'll tell you the SEO is not going to link to her website yet.
I'll have to let my team know. That's a buzzword, right?
You have to do some Google ads and buy some promoted keywords for CJ Snazzy Law.
I like it. Gotta get merch.
So, Cassandra, I appreciate you being on. Rental agreements are a big deal for us. It's something that TC and I spent a lot of time on early on, because much like our episode on just the liability protections and everything that Airbnb and VRBO offers as a supplemental offering, we dug into those OTAs or those solutions offered from a rental agreement front, and we just looked at each other like, all right, we got to do our own. We have to work on this. We have to add the level of protection, and we have to clearly spell out to our guests really, what they need to know about using our space and respecting the space, but then also enjoying the space. So, we have our own. You've been nice enough to review it for us, and we're going to be making some adjustments, the right adjustments to it. But, I think everyone asking and everyone listening is really wondering, should I and why would I need a rental agreement if I'm using Airbnb and VRBO? And I'd love for you to clarify that.
Sure. So first, as always, I have to give my legal disclaimer, because last time I waited till the end and I was told accountability is important on this podcast. So with that being said, I am only a licensed attorney in the state of Florida, and I am not giving any kind of advice that would create a personal client-attorney relationship. With that being said, I am giving general legal advice. That's okay. So in regards to rental agreements, there are a couple of things, common problems that they can protect you from. And since in our previous episodes, we discussed that this is a business, this is a legacy for your family, it's very important to get ahead of these issues before, it gets to be a problem. So the first one that I want to talk about briefly is tax related stuff, why a rental agreement will help with tax related stuff. So I am not an accountant, CPA, etc. However, if you're running a short-term rental business, you should probably know that the IRS provides a tax exemption for 14-day or less vacation rental properties. If you are in that category, you have to keep records of the dates you rented out your property so that you can provide that to the IRS. A good way to do that is with the rental agreement. So that's one example. Now, I think a lot of people are going to be renting for more than 14 days a year. Understood. Still good for record keeping and tax purposes. Another situation where rental agreements are very helpful is when a guest won't leave. There are several cases that I have seen, particularly in California, where their squatters' rights are real, okay, and they're problematic for short-term rental owners. With a rental agreement in place, you have way more leverage to formally evict your guest via the courts. So another thing to consider. Another thing that would really help with your short-term rental business in terms of having a rental agreement is in the event you have damaged property. Now, we discussed in a previous podcast that Airbnb, VRBO, several other vacation rental platforms do have insurance in place that covers damages. A short-term rental agreement, though, will come in handy when they decline the claim, for example, or it's something that's excluded because you have a contract in place that is laying out, in the event of damages, this is what you can expect. Both parties have signed. It's then enforceable in a court of law. Another, to go right down, and I'm sorry, I know this is boring, guys, but it's very helpful for you, I promise. So on that topic, if you are having to litigate damaged property, you can put into a rental agreement who pays for the very expensive attorney fees. If you don't have that documentation, it's very difficult short of getting a judgment. So that is a whole other thing that you can cover in your rental agreement. And then, like I said, to me, the biggest takeaway is that in the event of something happening that isn't covered by Airbnb, or there is an injury or something along those lines, you have a clear picture with your tenant or your guest of what to expect when that happens. So 100% recommend rental agreements. They can cover everything you can think of, and it creates a good relationship right from the start. Everybody knows what to expect.
There's a little bit of defensive strategy here as well, right? I mean, that's the piece where if you have a guest who's maybe thinking about, I'm going to throw this great party, I'm going to invite all these people, and I've done this before, and we're going to bring 30 of our closest friends, and we're going to have an awesome party. As soon as that rental agreement hits their inbox, they start to understand that, maybe this isn't the right property to do this at. And I'm going to keep hunting until I find one without a rental agreement, because I know I can get away with it by leveraging, an owner who maybe isn't thinking strategically about this.
Right. An owner that's not running it like a business, right? Yeah, exactly.
I use the OTAs or I use Airbnb, I use VRBO. They're great. They handle everything. And it's like, well, they don't. And I don't think there's never been a point where they advertise that they handle everything, right? I mean, they're providing a service and they're getting you guests, and they provide some supplemental coverages and services, but it really does fall to you as the owner to understand where those gaps are and then fill those gaps. Don't just let them sit there. I guess the question, and TC, I know you've spent some time with, the rental agreement side of it as well, but, the question always comes into, how do I enforce this? Like, I don't even know as an owner, I have a rental agreement. What do I do if I find myself needing to enforce it? Do I go through Airbnb and VRBO first with their coverage and their stuff, and then do I use mine? I mean, we all want to live in a day and age where we don't ever have to enforce it, but I think the more you do this, the more properties you have, pretty inevitable that this is going to be something where you're going to have to enforce this tool.
Yeah, fully. Yeah, I completely understand. Yeah. So it really depends. And I know that's such a lawyer answer. It's going to be my answer to a lot of things, but it depends on the circumstances, right? So I'll give you an example. If somebody's overstayed past your clearly defined rental period, you need to go right in and evict them. You give them a 3-day notice. That's something that, you can either have a lawyer do, or if you've done it long enough, some people do it themselves. I mean, honestly, it's fine. So that, right away, legal process, 100%. With damage to the property, Airbnb and VRBO do offer some coverage for that. So, and that's on the previous podcast, to plug the previous podcast.
Right. Episode 113.
Yeah, there you go. So in that case, I would, first make a claim with Airbnb. And then if they're giving you a hard time, then, go to your insurance company, show them the contract. There's something called subrogation, which they can do so they can pay you. Then they can go after these people, and it creates less of a, process for you, because that's the goal, right? But really, if you're doing this as a business, you got to have a lawyer that you have a relationship with, because inevitably you're going to have to send what's called a demand letter to kick off the legal process. So like generally when a contract is breached, which is what this is, a rental agreement is a contract, your first step is to notify the other party of a breach and request whatever that may be. So let's say, I don't even know, like the damages, right? The damages exceeded. I'll give you an example of what Airbnb's coverage would cover. Then you'd want to send a demand letter saying, hey, I've identified these damages here. You have 10 days to pay, or we're going to pursue further litigation. That's an example of something that I would do or another lawyer would do. And so that's how you enforce. You start with a demand letter, then you file in the appropriate court of law, which a rental agreement helps there too, because like yours is very good. In my review, it discusses jurisdiction and venue. So you really get to, play out exactly how you want in terms of the enforcement process with a good rental agreement.
So Cassandra, with squatters, so with people that have overstayed their defined period of time, I think for a lot of owners that we work with, that's a real conundrum that they don't know how to deal with. So someone was supposed to check out on Sunday, only to find out Monday morning they're still there. What do you do? So practically speaking, do you call the sheriff? What are the steps that an owner should take to protect them? Because usually if you're squatting, one can assume they're probably up to no good as well. So what are the actionable steps that an owner can take?
So it's going to depend on your jurisdiction, okay? Because states have different rules, but I will give you a general flow so you know where to go. And then I'll also tighten down on Florida, which I've done eviction law before. I've evicted squatters before, so I'm very familiar with how it works in the state of Florida. So you're going to provide some form of a notice, a written notice that can be posted on the door or served to the person. And in Florida, it's a 3-day pay or quit notice, essentially. And if they do not pay, for the 3 days, by the day after the third day, there's some statutory language there, you can then file and get them evicted like you would a regular tenant. And so you file a eviction request or a complaint with technically it's like a lower form of the county court in Florida, as an example. I don't know about other states. And then you will ask for an answer within 5 days. And if they don't answer, then you can then get them evicted. There are not a lot of defenses to this. Then the defenses you're allowed to assert all require payment into the court registry, which you then can ask the court for the money. So generally what I see is there is no response. Then at that point you get what's called a writ of possession, and the sheriff comes out and removes the person, or there's some written response. Then you get a lawyer to say that's not a real response, and then you get the eviction done. So my key takeaways from that are move as quickly as possible. The longer that they stay, the more damage they're going to do. And the sooner you get the court system involved, the sooner that they can help you with damages. Property damages are a component of getting people evicted, and repayment of the money, because you either pay into the registry in Florida or you get evicted. I mean, there aren't a lot of defenses. And so definitely start the process as soon as possible if you know somebody's overstaying their rental period.
And Cassandra, when you say post, put a notice on the door, is that a physical act? I'm assuming that an email, a text message, that doesn't apply. You've actually got to put a notice on the door. And, Tim, I think this is where, once again, relying on our partners at CleaningBnB, that's something that they can help with. So post that notice on the door. I think most owners are always a bit concerned with being placed in a vulnerable situation. Probably no way around that, is there?
Not really. Yeah. I mean, my landlords usually will, and again, this is Florida, okay? Because I don't even know California. They're very liberal, and that's not a stab at all. I just think that they may have to have a process server. I have no clue. Okay, just to be clear. So a Google search will help you. Generally, the courts have a lot of self-help measures because they really want to protect the people that own this property. So I don't know about different legislative areas, jurisdictions, etc. But yeah, in Florida, what I've had my landlords do is simply tape it on the door, take a picture with the timestamp, and then you'll fill out this form that just says, I posted it at this time on this date. And then you leave it. It's not worth the confrontation. I also have had some landlords that body cam because they don't want any impropriety alleged, because that's
Right.
your next step, right? Is, they're harassing me, whatever, hurt me, break stuff, etc. So yeah, so body cam, affixing it with tape, and then just leaving. I mean, you don't have to knock on the door and be like, you're, squatting, get the F out, for example. I mean, there are ways around it. I mean,
Well, and being in the short-term rental space versus the long-term rental space is you're probably coming up against another guest checking it. In some instances, that guest's supposed to check out on Sunday. It's Monday. They're still there. You have a guest checking in on Tuesday. So now you're in the position of having to cancel that guest's stay on short notice, which as a business owner looks bad on you. It's not like, a family planning their vacation isn't going to care. I have to cancel your vacation because I can't get this guest out of my house. That's still taking a huge hit to your business and your reputation. And so there's those challenges of now you've also got to manage that incoming guest. And if you're looking at, 3 days and just the kind of process of it, this is going to stretch into some other income impacts for your business. We put smart home technology in our house. We've talked at length about it. I know when we assign a key code to get into and out of the house, that expires at their checkout time. That's not going to keep someone from staying in the house and not. But then I think you're also, as an owner, you have to be very careful not to be vindictive of, you do want to make. And I guess this is my question for you. Is I immediately think, because I'm somewhat of aggressive and have been known to been told I have a temper, I'm going to set that alarm to stay, because I can set your alarm. I can set the alarm outside of a guest stay. When a guest is there, I can't. But when the guest is outside of their checkout time, I can go in, I can set the alarm to stay. When you open that door, that alarm's going to go off and you don't have a code to turn it off. And okay, maybe I'm an asshole, but you're staying past your stay, and I think there's a lot of owners that they don't know what to do. And so some percentage of them may play a little more offense than maybe there is in their legal right. I'm not sure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my strategy on the alarm.
Well, so it really depends again on your area, but I know that there is an argument that can be made to not follow the process that I just gave. And the argument is that you are operating as a hotel. And if you're operating as a hotel, you have the right, when somebody doesn't pay, to kick them out, right? I mean, there's a little bit different between a landlord-tenant relationship and even lesser so hotel owner and hotel guest. So that you have to make sure that you don't qualify as a landlord-tenant and you have a liability for safeguarding their property and personal belongings. Those are my main concerns. So even if you say change the locks and all their stuff is still inside, you have to safeguard and protect that and return that, right? On the other hand, though, if you are considered a landlord-tenant, and it will depend on your area, that is what is considered self-help eviction, and it is not allowed. And there will be arguments made if these people lawyer up. With that being said, on the other hand, most of them don't, just speaking from experience. So, do with that what you will. You can charge additional fees on top of the deposit for damages. Just like, I just want to readdress that. Like, if there is some issue and they will not leave and they break stuff, you will get that money as well in the civil process of the lawsuit.
This is why we have great partners, so that before I haul off and just turn the alarms on, I would call Cassandra and I'd say, hey, Cassandra, I've got a question. Can I set these alarms off? And you're going to say, no, dummy, don't do that. And, that's where, again, why we're having these partner profiles is because, having the right partner, having a trusted resource to bounce these ideas and thoughts off of when you're living it in the moment is so essential. TC, sorry for cutting you off there.
So in the rental agreement, we clearly state that the neighborhood that we're in has a noise variance, and the decibel level has been clearly defined by the community. After 10 p.m., noise level not to exceed X decibel. So we put that in the rental agreement. And we also put in the rental agreement that this is a strictly non-smoking property. And we have technology in the home to detect both. So we have technology in the home that when the decibel level on the outside patio or inside the home exceeds a certain level, we get notified. And if smoking is detected, we get notified. Our first line of defense has always been to reach out to the guests and say, please don't do that. You signed a rental agreement. But where I find myself in a quandary is when they don't comply even after being notified. And I wonder if there's excessive noise and partying going on, or if there's smoking going on, what can you do during the stay to prevent ongoing damage to the property?
Let me go back really fast to the previous point, because this is going to address all that. So really, to get over that hurdle that I just discussed, potentially, depending on your jurisdiction, what you can do is discuss the relationship in the short-term rental agreement. Providing clear language that it is a short-term rental may help overcome the burden of that landlord-tenant relationship, just as a sidebar. Then to get into that piece, first off, I have a question for you. Can you tell if people are like vaping and stuff, asking for a friend?
Yes. So in the technology we have, technology plugged to Fresh Air. Fresh Air originally started in high-end hotels. And what Fresh Air technology does is detect any type of smoking device, such as marijuana, vaping, cigarettes, cigar. It doesn't detect food. So it prevents the kitchen, I burned popcorn, doesn't detect that. It's a chemical reaction that detects smoking, like vaping, cigar, marijuana, cigarette, and that's all it will detect. But I've always been in a quandary. If the guest doesn't stop doing it when I notify them, I don't know what to do next.
So when that happens, you want to make sure in your rental agreement that you have a clear right to terminate if the renters violate any rules. At that point, you can have a discussion, from my understanding, with Airbnb, if you're using that as the platform, for example, and say, we have a strict rule of no smoking. Wait, here's our warning that we already gave. Here's the sensor. We would like to terminate. Now, there may be some discussion with the guests where they might want some money back, and that's going to be on you on whether or not you want to do that. If you have the clear language in your agreement, though, which is the whole point of all this, you can do whatever you want to do, short of it being horribly unconscionable, like you have to pay me $1 million for smoking. I mean, like something that's like a court would be like, okay, y'all are crazy. Like, anything where a court's not going to be like, you're crazy, you can do. So if they sign it, you can terminate their short-term rental agreement and require them to leave. And I would always say have that discussion with Airbnb so that, everybody's on the same page, so they don't come back and say, I didn't do anything wrong, they're kicking me out. You want Airbnb to have your back. And I hope that was intelligible and discernible given the situation.
Your live audience loved it. And I think this goes back to what TC just talked about. This is a trigger that causes a lot of short-term rental owners to just say, I'm just going to hire a property manager. I don't want to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how I would deal with this. Let me just hire a property manager. And at least in my experience, that doesn't really help your business. They're not, you're hiring someone to ignore the problem is in a lot of cases what you're doing. So I think about, the owners I've talked to, they've got a couple fears, right? A lot of them have the same conversation with me. Is their biggest fear is that they're going to have to, drive out to the property at 2 a.m. because they got a call that someone's toilet is clogged and they have to plunge the toilet. And they don't want to deal with that. So they're like, all right, I'm going to hire a property manager. Well, the property manager is just going to say, is there more than one bathroom? We'll deal with it tomorrow. Don't worry about it. So the other one is I'm getting notifications from my home and I'm seeing that there's a party going on. I see 20 cars parked in front. It's 2 a.m. I have people out in the front yard. All of my noise alerts, all of my smoking alerts are going off. I'm scared to death that I'm going to have to drive out to a property that I own and confront this large group of people to tell them to stop having a party. And yes, there's community noise ordinances. And yes, they've signed a rental agreement. But it just goes back to that. I don't know how to do that. I'm scared that I would have to do that as an owner. So property manager, you're in. Go for it. You're hired. And, just like with the toilet reference, the property manager's probably not going to do anything either. And so it's really about, can you do anything in real time at 2 a.m. if there's a party going on? You have to stay disciplined. You have to know the rules and requirements of the area of which you're doing business. You need to get on the phone with your lawyer. Don't call Cassandra at 2 a.m. I think would be the general direction that she's going to support. How do I, as an owner, address that in the moment? Because it's sort of that, you're watching your house burn down a little bit. You're living this in real time. You're certainly not going to go back to sleep and go, oh, cool, there's a huge party. They're probably destroying everything. I'm going to go sleep like a baby. It is truly that question of how should an owner think about addressing that in real time? Because that is such a trigger for the owners I talk to as to why they hire a property manager. And I don't think hiring a property manager is necessarily the answer to address that.
Yeah, that's a hard question, right? Because it depends on how much of an assertive person you are, number one. I know my family owns short-term rental companies and they do not use a property management. They self-manage. And they're on that stuff, like on it. So what they do, because they're trying to build a legacy, I guess, for me. I don't know. Am I building a legacy for them? Not sure. But they're on that. They have the noise. I knew they had the smoke thing, but I've never asked them about it because I don't want to be like, yeah, I'm gonna go smoke some dope at your short-term rental. So really fast, tell me what that does. I never. And so they whenever it goes off, they've got it set all the time. They will send a message right away. I mean, and they've got like templates where they, the noise has been exceeded, or I see on the camera there's more than your allowed guests. I mean, you have the right to do that because you want to protect your property. And from there, you just escalate it, right? Like I said, Airbnb can be your best friend if you've got proof of what's going on, because they want to protect their hosts. I mean, because just like you, they're running a business, right? And they want that good relationship. So escalate it, And if the guest causes a problem, you got to call the police. I know I'm a criminal defense attorney. I hate to ever give that advice. But sometimes you got to call the police. I mean, you do.
Well, I think we always like to give our listeners and owners some practical steps. And let me just kind of summarize a few practical steps, Cassandra, and please weigh in with other steps that our listening owners can take. One is have a rental agreement and be specific in that rental agreement along with what the consequences are. So as an example, in our rental agreement, no smoking. And if you do smoke, there's a $1,250 cleanup fee. That's a real number. That's what it takes to do an appropriate cleanup. So list what the penalty is in there. Another practice that I have taken on over time and just with experience here is that as soon as the listing or the booking is made on Airbnb or VRBO, they do give you access to the guest's email. And what I do immediately is reach out to the guest and provide a copy of the rental agreement and to let them know that if there's something in the rental agreement they dislike, they can cancel the booking without penalty. What I'm trying to do is make them aware and give them the opportunity to back out if they plan on doing something that rental agreement specifically calls out as a violation. And that has actually resulted in a few folks canceling their booking after I send them the rental agreement. So that's been helpful. And then the technology in the home allows you to hold the guest accountable to those behaviors. So first, rental agreement. Second, give them the opportunity to cancel the booking if the rental agreement isn't in alignment with what they plan on doing. And then thirdly, have the technology to hold them accountable and then communicate if you sense that a violation is occurring. What other action steps can you help us with, provide to our owners as far as practical things that they can do and still feel like they are in complete charge of managing that property?
I would say if you are not an assertive bulldog, to have templates, it makes you feel better, like in terms of templates to communicate. Like my family's company has one for service animals, ironically, which we're going to discuss later. They have one for noise. They have one for smoke thing going off. I don't know what it's called. Sorry, lawyer, not property manager. The smoke thing. And then they have too many guests being seen on the outdoor camera. So then you're not like, I'm not attacking you. And I can show as a business that I'm treating everybody the same, which is key for compliance with harassment, discrimination, etc. So then you just copy and you paste it. It's 2 a.m. You're tired. The noise is going off. Copy and paste. It's just business. That helps make the anxiety better too, which I know you had talked about, is the anxiety of like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be confrontational. You're not. It's just business. Here's what I say every time. So, templates are helpful. And like I said, if there is a lot of damage being done, or like they're out in the like breezeway, or like depending on what kind of property you have, parking lot, like in the street, like call the police, because you don't want to get your neighbors bent out of shape over you doing short-term rentals because the guests act this way. So, I mean, those would be the two things that I would say. You great as always, TC. Hard to add to, but great.
Well, I would also say we're spending a lot of time on this topic because it's one of those areas that cause a lot of stress for owners, but it really is the exception and not the rule. It's something that we want to make sure owners are prepared for if it does occur. But in our experience, it truly is the exception. But when those exceptions do occur, there are action steps that an owner can take as good preventative measures, but then also good reactive measures if indeed something is occurring. And I think the message here to all of our listeners is don't be intimidated by this. A rental agreement and some good action steps can prepare you for dealing with these situations as a self-manager of your property so that you're not intimidated and that you don't just resort to using a property manager and draining all of your income.
Yeah, I agree. The rental agreement's key. I mean, the rental agreement, you set expectations and, I mean, you're set. But go ahead, Tim. Sorry to interrupt.
No, and I think the rental agreement is your strategy map for all of your partners. It gives you the confidence to self-manage, and it allows you to say, I can build, our sponsor CleaningBnB. They offer a pre-check-in and post-checkout inspection service, and that part of that post-checkout inspection service is your rental agreement. There's a list of things that need to be done as part of that rental agreement, and that individual doing the inspection is going to be taking thorough photographs. So you have processes in place. You've got great legal counsel to be able to call if these one-offs actually happen to you, where 99% of the time you're going to have a great guest and they're going to take great care of the space, and CleaningBnB is going to come in and clean the house, no issue. But you've got the systems and processes in place for when if it does occur, you are more activating your partners and following templates and following steps that you already have in place, so that a property management company is not essential. It is not an essential requirement, because I got to tell you, I've heard far more instances where the property management company doesn't do anything versus when they actually take a proactive approach to solving this problem for you, because a property management business model is scale. I mean, that is, the more properties we can get on board doing the minimal amount of work, that's how we build our business model. Whereas you as a property owner, you can build a business model that says, okay, I'm going to start with one property. I'm going to scale it. I'm going to eventually get to 5 properties. And I know when I get to X number of properties, I can start to build my own property management company if I feel that it is necessary through 1 or 2 strategic hires and then great partners. So, this is really about, and everything we talk about it's not challenging. It just requires you to have a strategy if you're going to self-manage your property, and then be ready to execute on that strategy. So, Cassandra, I think this has been another great episode for our listeners. TC, as always, another great episode where we're kind of breaking down barriers and excuses owners have that leads them to hire a property manager and not self-manage their property. We're just going to keep breaking down these barriers for people, because this is where you should have access to 100% of your revenue to build your business, not 80 or 75% of your revenue in order to try to make this work.
I think that's exactly right. And just one final recap, because I'm a fanatic when it comes to recapping. Number 1, have a rental agreement. It's your best friend, or it can be your best friend in those situations where you need it. Number 2, best practice, in your VRBO and Airbnb listing, let the potential guest know that you use a rental agreement, and they'll be expected to sign it. Number 3, when your property is booked, send the rental agreement to the guest and give them an out. If they review the rental agreement and they don't feel like complying with those rules, let them out. That's the best time to mitigate your risk, is when they message that those rules are something they don't plan on complying with. Next, have technology in your home. Doesn't have to be overly expensive, but have the technology in your home so that the rules and guidelines that you note in your rental agreement can be monitored, and so that you can hold the guest accountable if they so elect to break those rules and guidelines. Next, use good communication if your rules are being broken. Good communication to let them know that you're aware and you expect them to comply with the rules. And then last but not least, go to VRBO and Airbnb to support you. If you have a rental agreement and you can prove that those rules are being broken, let Airbnb and VRBO come and support you as well. And lastly, never want to do this, but go to the sheriff if you need to. I will tell you, I've never had to use the sheriff, but they are there to support you in those times of need. Final comment, this is the exception, not the rule. We just want to make sure that our owners are prepared if those exceptions do occur. We want to make sure that you are prepared and well-informed so that you can once again be confident and competent in your self-management.
That was great.
That was great. Well done, TC. We've done it again. Another great episode 114. If you want to, a lot of the previous stuff we referenced on this episode, I know episode 107 was a great technology episode where we gave an overview of the technology that we've personally found success with and get a little more detail there. This partner profile series is going to continue rolling on. Next up, little sneak peek, we're going to be talking service animals. So that's going to be a fun episode to record. I'm very much looking forward to that episode. And we're just going to keep charging along, answering your questions, breaking down the barriers that you may have for self-managing your property. So like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell anyone interested about short-term rental management and short-term rental investing. And we'll be here to answer your questions. As always, thanks everyone. See you next episode.